Hey guys, tonight we climb aboard a creaking pirate vessel. Not the movie kind with dramatic cannon shots and guitar riffs, but something far sleepier, slower, and smellier. You're standing on a warm, sun-bleached deck somewhere in the Caribbean, squinting at the horizon while the sails flap lazily overhead. There's no engine hum, no Wi-Fi signal, and certainly no clock ticking away on the wall. Time here isn't just fluid, it's practically imaginary. The day drips by like molasses in a storm, and somehow, the crew still manages to eat, sleep, sail, and survive. Most of the time you'll find that no one on this ship carries a pocket watch. There's no bell to ring every hour, no calendar tacked to the mast. In fact, if you were to ask, "What time is it?" you'd probably get a laugh, a shrug, or, if the pirate is particularly generous, time for you to scrub the deck. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what time it is by your clock. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully over a coil of rope, still half damp with salt water, and lean against the railing. There's a warm breeze, a gull or two overhead, and the endless horizon yawns open around you. It's beautiful in that slow, endless kind of way. The crew around you moves with a rhythm, but not a schedule. They know when to tie knots, hoist sails, or duck from the first mate's swinging boot, but they never say, "See you at 3. You notice this almost immediately. There are no clocks. And that's not just a stylistic choice. Pirates didn't have clocks. Timekeeping in the 1600s and 1700s was a luxury, not a given. Accurate portable timepieces, what we'd call pocket watches, were both rare and wildly expensive. Most merchant ships didn't carry them, let alone scrappy bands of sea rogues who stole their ships in the first place. Even the earliest marine chronometers, those ingenious seafaring clocks designed for navigation, wouldn't become common until the late 1700s. And pirates weren't exactly placing mail orders for cutting-edge British engineering. So, how did they keep time? Well, they didn't. Not the way you're used to, anyway. Time on a pirate ship was more about feeling than measuring. It was a gut sense, a collective rhythm, a weirdly shared delusion. You wake, eat, haul, swear, and sleep based on what everyone else is doing, and if you fall out of sync, you find out pretty fast when someone throws a mop at you for napping in the sun during sail trimming. The thing is, once you remove mechanical timekeeping, the world starts to slow down. It doesn't stop, it just breathes differently. You start to notice how the angle of the sun makes the ropes glow a certain golden color in the late afternoon. You begin to feel when it's getting close to morning, based on the smell of dried fish and whatever counts as coffee bubbling near the firebox. You don't know it's 7:45 a.m., you just know it's almost your turn to scrub the deck. Historians still argue whether pirate crews function better because of this loose structure or despite it. Some claim the absence of strict clocks fostered a more democratic, flexible working environment, less rigid hierarchy, more shared decision-making. Others think it was chaos in slow motion, barely held together by luck and rum. One thing's for sure, without bells or clocks, the very concept of an hour gets slippery. A hot afternoon can stretch like a taut rope. A stormy night might flash by in a blink. Your mind plays tricks when time isn't printed on a glowing screen or ticking loudly from your wrist. Pirates adapted to this, perhaps better than most of us ever could. You sit on a crate near the stern, feeling the roll of the sea beneath you, trying to guess what time it might be. But the guesses are wild. Is it noon? Late afternoon? Does it matter? A pirate ship didn't run on hours. It ran on tasks, tides, and temperaments. There's something oddly calming about that. You don't check your phone because you don't have one. You don't care when the sun sets, only whether you've finished your job before dark. The stress of punctuality, the kind that buzzes in your pocket all day long, is completely gone. And in its place, a deep, strange stillness. Even when the ship's busy, it's unhurried, purposeful, loosely choreographed like a sleepy ballet performed entirely in sweat, rope burn, and half-finished shanties. Of course, this doesn't mean pirates were lazy or aimless. They were opportunists, sure, but opportunists with sails to hoist, cargo to steal, wounds to clean, and hammocks to fix. It just means they had to find other ways to pace themselves. Which brings us to the real puzzle you'll face on this ship. How do you know when your shift starts? When's lunch? When does the captain get cranky if you're still snoring in your hammock? The answers, you'll soon learn, aren't found on a wall. They're hidden in sunlight, stars, grains of sand, and the quiet, steady flipping of a glass, but you're not quite there yet. For now, you're just sitting cross-legged on the deck, listening to the soft thump of feet above you, a seagull shrieking its complaints into the wind, and the creak 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 of wood that's older than most cities. You lean back against the barrel, your eyelids growing heavier than you'd like to admit, and try to imagine what it would be like to live without time. Really without it. Spoiler, you probably wouldn't survive this, but pirates did. Somehow. You wake up to the feeling of sun on your face and absolutely no clue what time it is. That's the first thing you notice again. Not the sound of bells or someone yelling, 7 o'clock sharp. Just sunlight crawling across the deck planks like honey. The crew is already moving, not rushing, but not quite wandering either. They seem to know what to do. You, meanwhile, are still trying to figure out whether you've slept through breakfast, or if it just never happened. That's when you notice something interesting. Every pirate seems to glance at the sun. Not just for the warmth or the glare, there's intent behind it. They're tracking it. Quietly. Casually. But deliberately. This, believe it or not, was one of the earliest pirate timekeeping tools, the sun. No apps, no watches, just that giant flaming sky clock. You walk across the deck, shielding your eyes, and realize it's a little like being in a human sundial. Everyone's personal shadow tells them something. The angle it hits the railing, the direction it falls beside a barrel, they all offer little cues. Not precise minutes, no, but enough for a pirate to guess whether it's morning, midday, or time to start preparing dinner, which may or may not involve something recently crawling out of a barrel of brine. This method, while a bit crude, wasn't invented by pirates, of course. Ancient civilizations, Egyptians, Babylonians, the Greeks, used sundials with great sophistication. But out here on the sea, there's no temple garden or open plaza. There's only the shifting deck beneath you and the position of the sun relative to the sails. Sometimes, pirates would drive a stick into a beam, just to watch the shadow move, creating a makeshift sundial. You squint at one now, wedged into a knot in the floorboard. The shadow's stubby and short, which probably means it's close to noon. Or it means nothing at all. You really don't know. Historians still argue whether pirates used these intentionally or if they were more of a general guide for bored deckhands and sun-staring quartermasters. There's no surviving Pirate's Sundial Manual. Unfortunately, still, the sun was just one method. You're told, by an older crewmate missing 2 fingers and wearing a shirt that may once have been white, that some pirates preferred a more tactile approach, watching how far the sunlight had crept across the deck by a certain point in the day. A long stretch of light reaching the captain's chair? Probably lunchtime. A red slant hitting the mainmast? Start checking your hammock for rats. It sounds silly at first, but think about it. You don't need a clock if you've got routine and reference points. You don't need a bell if you've got shadows and squinting. Now here's the downside. This all falls apart on cloudy days. If the sky is overcast or if a storm brews up from the east, as it does every few weeks without fail, then the sun disappears, and your lazy sundial system goes with it. And pirates? They spent a lot of time under cloudy skies. Especially during hurricane season. When that happened, the crew resorted to their backup plan, guessing. Some would watch the sky's brightness, others would follow the general shift in wind and air temperature. The ship itself becomes a timepiece if you know how to listen to it. The sails react differently to morning breezes than they do to dusk drafts. The sea changes color. The birds disappear, or arrive, if you're lucky enough to be near land. Still, it's an imperfect system at best. One that relies more on collective memory than precision. And here's the part most people forget: pirates didn't need precision. Their lives weren't structured around hourly meetings or train schedules. They didn't need to clock in at 9 a.m. sharp to avoid a passive-aggressive note from their boss. No, their world was organized by larger, slower rhythms. Tide changes, trade winds, ship repairs, and gut instincts. It was more about when things felt ready than when the minute hand struck 12. That said, the sun had one particularly important function: determining direction. By watching it rise in the east and set in the west, pirates could roughly orient themselves. Combine that with the stars, more on those later, and you've got yourself a surprisingly effective guidance system. But don't let the romance of the sun fool you. Sometimes, the crew would argue. "It's noon." Someone might grumble while gnawing on dried beef jerky. "No, it ain't." The cook snaps back, elbow deep in a pot of beans. These arguments could stretch on for entire afternoons, all because of one shared truth: no one actually knew what time it was. Still, there's something liberating about that. You lean back against the railing and watch as the ship creaks through open water, no destination in sight, no calendar nagging anyone, no hourly alerts reminding them to hydrate, journal, or do 15 push-ups. Just the soft drift of sun and sail and time that moves like molasses in the heat. And yes, occasionally, someone would guess very wrong. Like the time you hear about a pirate who tried to start dinner 4 hours early, only to discover the beans were still raw and the captain wasn't amused. Or the deckhand who swore it was nightfall and went to sleep at high noon. Mistakes like that could lead to minor disasters, or at least some very grumpy shipmates. But nobody got fired for showing up late to the poop deck. This wasn't corporate. This was pirate time. And pirate time, at least when the skies were clear, belonged to the sun, and to the shadows it cast across the ship's warped and wandering planks. You blink in the light, watching your own shadow stretch long and slow. You still don't know what hour it is. But for some reason, you don't care anymore. You're leaning against a barrel near the helm when you finally see it, the thing you've been told about but hadn't actually noticed until now. It's small, unimpressive, and doesn't shine like treasure or gleam like a polished compass. It's a glass, though not the kind you drink from. Inside, fine sand trickles steadily from one bulb into another. A pirate's sandglass. It's easy to miss. It just lies there on a wooden shelf beside a rusty sextant and a half-finished map. But this humble object, filled with nothing but sand, is probably the most accurate thing on the whole ship. You pick it up carefully. It feels warm from the sun. The glass is slightly clouded and there's a scratch across its side, as though someone once tried to open it with a knife. But the sand flows evenly. You watch, mesmerized, as the grains spill in a steady line. No drama, no urgency. Just time, falling. This is the half-hour glass. Not an hourglass, not a minute timer. This one marks 30 minutes precisely. Or rather, it did, when it was made, assuming the sand hasn't absorbed moisture or the neck hasn't widened from age or damage. But pirates didn't worry about perfect calibration. They needed consistency, not science. This little glass ran the show in ways you wouldn't expect. It told the bosun when to switch watches, when to wake the next groggy crewman, when to shout orders and when to hush the deck. Every 30 minutes, a crew member, usually the one not currently covered in fish guts or dangling from a rope, flipped it. Silently. Methodically. Over and over again. You learn quickly, time aboard isn't measured once and forgotten. It's maintained. Manually. Constantly. Someone always has to be watching the glass. When the last grain drops, it flips. And then it flips again. And again. Each flip, another notch in the rhythm of the ship. This method was standard on many vessels, not just pirate ones. Naval ships used similar devices to regulate duty watches, often in tandem with bells, though pirates generally left the bells behind. But we'll get to that later. For now, picture this. The ship is rolling gently, the sails creaking like sleepy knees. And in the middle of all that natural chaos, one hand steadily flips a small glass. That's pirate time. Less of a countdown, more of a ritual. Historians still argue whether the typical pirate crew used a half-hour glass or preferred the full-hour version, depending on what they could get their hands on. Records are spotty, and most of what we know comes from merchant or naval accounts, not from the pirates themselves. But half-hour glasses were favored on many ships because they broke the day into manageable, equal chunks, perfect for rotating duties without creating mutiny. And mutiny, as you've likely guessed, was always lurking. You ask a crewman, one with a missing eyebrow and a suspiciously new hat, what happens if someone forgets to flip the glass? He squints at you and mutters. Then time stops. You laugh, but he doesn't. He's serious. Because to pirates, it does stop. If no one flips the glass, no one knows when to change the watch. If no one changes the watch, the same tired men stay at the wheel too long. Eyes close. Sails go untended. Storms creep up. Ships drift. Trouble follows. Time wasn't a luxury here. It was a thread keeping everything barely tied together. So pirates treated this glass with reverence. Not the kind of reverence you give to a religious relic, no. More like how you treat the only working can opener on a camping trip. It's essential, ugly, and everyone knows where it is at all times. There's even a superstition whispered between the younger deckhands, that if the glass is dropped and shatters, the ship will suffer a miscounted death. No one's exactly sure what that means, but no one wants to find out. And here's where things get really interesting. Because the sandglass didn't just mark time for watches, it also marked speed. That's right. Pirates sometimes used a trick called the log line method. You tie a knotted rope to a piece of wood, toss it overboard, and let it trail behind the ship. Then, you count how many knots slip through your fingers before the sand in the glass runs out. More knots in less time? Faster ship. That's where we get the term knots for nautical speed. Each knot in the rope marked a unit of distance traveled per interval of time. And what measured the interval? Your humble sandglass, ticking along with no batteries, no fuss, just gravity and a bit of dried volcanic rock from who knows where. It was genius, really. Low-tech but wildly effective, assuming your sandglass wasn't cracked, and no one got distracted flirting with the cook. There's something comforting about the rhythm. The quiet flip every 30 minutes becomes a sort of lullaby. Like breathing. The crew doesn't even react to it anymore. It just happens. One flip, two flips, three flips, and suddenly, you realize you've been watching this hourglass for a whole afternoon. You wonder how many times it's flipped since this morning. A dozen? 20? 50? No one's really keeping count, and that's kind of the point. Because unlike in your world, where every second buzzes or beeps or flashes at you with notifications, this glass makes no sound. No blinking. No warnings. Just sand falling, and for pirates, that was enough. That was time. Not as a weapon, not as a deadline, but as a companion. You gently set the glass back on its shelf, careful not to drop it. Then you step away, letting it continue its silent labor, unaware of how many eyes and lives depend on it. You've barely stepped away from the sandglass when a shout rings out across the deck. Not panicked, not angry, just the sharp call of someone swapping shifts. You glance around and notice the subtle shuffle of bodies, the lazy uncoiling of muscles, the reluctant groans of pirates getting ready to do what no pirate ever wants to do, worked out its time for a watch change. Now, before you picture an Apple Watch or even a sundial strapped to a bicep, remember, in pirate terms, a watch wasn't a device, it was a duty. A ship divided the day and night into chunks of time called watches, usually about 4 hours each. Crews rotated through them to make sure someone was always steering, scanning the horizon, and occasionally swabbing the deck just to look busy. But here's the fun twist. With no clocks and no bells, how did pirates know when one watch ended and the next began? Simple, they guessed. And when guessing wasn't enough, they sang. You settle down next to a deckhand named Tuck. He has one gold tooth and smells vaguely like rum and pickled onions. Tuck explains, with surprising clarity, that pirates often used a method known as the rope and chant. Not an official term, mind you. It's just what they called it on this ship. Here's how it works. One pirate grabs a rope with a set number of knots tied in it. They toss it down, then chant a steady tune, keeping time by voice alone. When they reach the end of the chant, or the last knot, they flip the sandglass. If it feels off, they speed up or slow down their singing. It's part rhythm, part intuition, part seafaring nonsense. But it works. Kind of. Historians still argue whether these chant-based systems were widely used or just a quirk of certain crews. Some claim it's folklore, others believe there's enough evidence in sailors' journals and maritime dictionaries to suggest real use. After all, sailors did rely heavily on rhythm, for hauling lines, rowing, even stitching sails. Why not for marking time? It's a little like counting elephants to estimate seconds. Except in this case it's 1 dead parrot, 2 dead parrots, 3 salty wenches, and so on. The chant may change depending on mood, weather, or how creative the quartermaster is feeling that day. You try it. You grab the rope, count the knots, and sing under your breath, something about rotting coconuts and angry captains. It's harder than it looks. Your tempo drifts. The knots slip. The chant collapses halfway through and ends in laughter. Tuck slaps your back and says, close enough. We ain't building a cathedral. The thing is, pirate life wasn't about precision. It was about rhythm. The chant and rope method was less about being exactly right and more about keeping the crew in sync. If everyone agrees that the shift ends when the chant ends, then that's what happens. Simple. Crude. Effective. Of course, things got complicated when someone forgot the chant. Or changed it. Or made it too catchy and suddenly you've got 6 people singing about moldy hardtack at the top of their lungs while the captain tries to sleep. This brings us to another unofficial timekeeping trick: body memory. You start to notice that most of the crew feels their watch ending. Their backs ache in predictable places. Their mouths dry at predictable times. They don't need a bell. They just know when 4 hours has crawled past. You ask another sailor, a wiry woman called Redbone, how she keeps time. She shrugs and says, "You know it's shift change when your right hip starts tingling." Modern sailors would call that ridiculous. But here, it's gospel. And you can't argue with gospel when the sea is your church and the wind is your choir. Then there's the watch glass. Not the one from earlier, but a separate hourglass used solely to track watches. Sometimes it was labeled with marks, sometimes it wasn't. A quartermaster or first mate might flip it 8 times during the day, one for each half hour, and announce each flip as a kind of soft chime. But here's the kicker: pirates hated bells. Unlike the Royal Navy, which rang a ship's bell at regular intervals, pirates preferred silence. Bells drew attention. Bells told merchant ships they were coming. Bells told naval patrols, "Hey! Over here! Robbery in progress!" So they sang. They hummed. They whispered. A pirate ship's sense of time was more like a lullaby than a factory buzzer. You feel it too. After a while, your body stops asking for the time. You stop wondering how long you've been swabbing the deck. You just swab. And when someone taps you on the shoulder, you move aside and let the next poor soul take over. No words exchanged. Just motion. It's absurdly calming. And yet it works. This floating society of groggy, sunburned scavengers somehow keeps running. They know when to rotate, when to sleep, when to take the helm, and when to climb the rigging. All without a single mechanical timekeeper. You look at the crew again and see it differently now. They're not disorganized, they're synchronized. Like crabs moving sideways across a beach. Seemingly random, but somehow avoiding collisions. Barely. You stretch your legs, feel the warmth of the deck through your pants, and try humming the last chant you heard. It sticks in your head like a song from a bad tavern band. You don't even know what the words mean, but your brain has latched onto the rhythm. Welcome to pirate time. Not built on seconds or alarms, but on patterns, pulses, and just enough rope to make it all feel real. By the time you find your way below deck again, your stomach is louder than the waves slapping against the hull. The air down here is warmer, thicker, and absolutely saturated with the scent of something boiling. You're not sure what. It could be fish, it could be beans, or it could be someone's old boots simmering with hope. But one thing's clear, it's mealtime. Sort of doubt that's the thing. On a pirate ship, meals were never served at exactly breakfast, lunch, or dinner, the way you might know them. They weren't announced with a bell or coordinated across departments. Instead, meals were more like floating landmarks on the day's horizon. If you didn't know what time it was, you could at least tell how far along things were based on whether someone was gnawing on dried meat or stirring a pot of eel stew. You slip into the mess area, a generous term, since it's really just a dim corner with a cracked table and a pot swinging from a hook. Around you, pirates slump into place, scooping ladles of food into wooden bowls or just grabbing handfuls directly. A few eat in silence, others murmur sleepily or hum half-remembered sea songs. No one seems in a rush. This is how pirates mark their time, not with clocks, but with food. Meals were the most reliable temporal anchor they had. If you knew you were eating your second portion of salted pork for the day, chances are you were well into afternoon. If you were slurping broth in near darkness, probably evening. And if you were chewing on hardtack while the sails were barely visible in the first blush of dawn? Yep, morning maybe. There wasn't always enough food, of course. Sometimes the schedule slipped because there just wasn't anything to serve. You quickly learned the phrase, "Dinner's when the cook says so," could mean any time between 10 a.m. and midnight, or not at all. Still, even in scarcity, food created rhythm. Even bad meals were a form of clockwork. A bowl of gruel eaten at the same point in the sail rotation as yesterday? That's timekeeping, in its most edible form. And just like that, you're served a scoop of something unidentifiable, steaming slightly and giving off a smell that could be anything from seaweed to goat. You sit cross-legged on the floor, bowl in hand, and realize that in this world, your hunger is more accurate than any watch. Historians still argue whether pirates adhered to consistent mealtimes or whether everything was done ad hoc, driven purely by stomachs and supply. Some suggest that captains enforced a rough meal schedule to avoid unrest. Others argue that chaos reigned and everyone simply ate when they could wrestle food from the pot. Either way, food wasn't just nourishment, it was structure. Even the cooking process helped keep the day grounded. The smoke from the galley fire drifting upward? That was a visual clue that the meal was near. The cook cursing louder than usual? That probably meant it was late. There were only a few constants in pirate cuisine. Salted meat. Hardtack, which was essentially flavorless concrete. Beans when they were lucky. Rum when they were really lucky. And sometimes, if the ship had just raided a merchant vessel, there'd be cheese, fruit, or, on the very best days, fresh bread. But that was rare. The kind of rare that people remembered for months. You overhear a conversation beside you, two men arguing whether the last time they had oranges was last winter or the winter before. One swears it was the port in Nassau. The other insists it was during the incident with the goat. Neither of them wins the debate, and both end up licking the bottom of their bowls like it might whisper the answer back to them. That's another thing about pirate meals. They were social events. Not formal, not refined, but communal. Meals were when the crew gossiped, plotted, apologized, or simply sat quietly and existed together. And while meals weren't rung in with a bell, they were often felt collectively. A crew member might mutter, "Should be time soon," and 5 minutes later the cook would appear. You couldn't predict it by the hour, but you could sense it. Like watching the wind change, or the mood of the captain swing from grumpy to shouty. Interestingly, pirates developed a kind of unspoken etiquette around food time. You didn't ask when it was coming. You didn't complain loudly when it was late. You definitely didn't snatch a second portion before everyone had theirs, unless you wanted a splintery spoon to the nose. Time, here, was tied to fairness. Everyone got fed at roughly the same moment, assuming the supplies held. The quartermaster made sure of it. In fact, food was one of the few things aboard a pirate ship that was strictly rationed, more tightly than cannonballs, more carefully than gunpowder. Because if you mess with a pirate's dinner, you mess with their only solid grasp on the passage of the day. You finish your own bowl of whatever it was and stretch. No one tells you to clean up. No one rings a bell or dismisses the table. People just drift away. Some shuffle off to mend sails, others climb to the lookout, and a few simply lie down near the barrels and nap like cats. It's all strangely peaceful. Not lazy, exactly, but fluid. Like time here isn't something you fight against. It's something you absorb. Digest, even. You walk back toward the stairs, listening to the creak of wood, the burble of the sea outside the hull, and the distant caw of a bird that's probably not a parrot but refuses to admit it. No one knows what time it is. But everyone knows what just happened. And that's enough. You're back on deck, full enough to feel content, but not so full you forget where you are, on a pirate ship, drifting across time like a bottle tossed into the waves. The sun has dipped lower in the sky now, not quite sunset, but getting there. And then you hear it, a distant clang. Not from your ship, but from somewhere out there, another vessel. The sound cuts across the wind, faint but unmistakable. A bell. The pirates around you freeze, not in fear, exactly, but with a sort of shared irritation. Someone sighs. Someone else spits. The captain squints toward the horizon and mutters something about Navy dogs and their clanging toys. You learn quickly, your ship doesn't use bells. Never has. Never will. Why? Because pirate ships, unlike Navy or merchant vessels, valued silence. Stealth. The ability to drift in unnoticed, appear suddenly, and vanish just as fast. A bell on a ship was like wearing a neon sign on your chest saying, "Please shoot me, I'm over here." Historically, bells were used by legitimate ships to signal time and organize duties. The system was relatively elegant. Every half hour, a bell rang. One ring for the first half hour, two for the second, all the way up to 8 bells, which marked the end of a 4-hour watch. Then the cycle reset. On a Royal Navy frigate, you could practically set your tea by it. But on a pirate ship, a bell was a liability. Not only did it give away your position in fog or at night, but it also introduced a kind of rigidity that didn't mesh with pirate culture. Pirate life was chaotic, yes, but purposefully so. Bells demanded strict attention, uniformity, and discipline. 3 things pirates found, let's just say optional. You ask the quartermaster why they never just muted the bell or used it only when anchored. He gives you a look like you've just suggested painting the sails bright orange. Too risky, he says. Too easy to slip up. And besides, bells don't know when to shut up. There's also a superstition, because of course there is. According to the older deckhands, ringing a bell at sea, especially without purpose, is calling to Davy Jones. Some say it's the sound he listens for, the echo he uses to find ships ripe for the sinking. One man tells you a story about a bell that rang once on its own during a dead calm. 3 hours later, the ship hit an uncharted reef. Coincidence? Probably. But you notice no one keeps a bell aboard just to find out. Historians still argue whether this superstition was widespread or just sailors' gossip. But enough records hint at real hesitation around bells among more superstitious crews, not just pirates, but fishermen and smugglers too. You glance at the mast. No bell. No gong. Nothing metallic at all, in fact, unless you count a frying pan someone repurposed into a hat after a bet gone wrong. Without bells, pirates relied on their senses. Visual cues. Sandglasses. Gut feelings. And sometimes, just yelling. You'll hear someone shout, "Watch change!" or "Heave now!" and that's enough. No chime needed. That said, pirate ships did sometimes repurpose bells they'd stolen, just not for timekeeping. You'll see them melted down for scrap, used as trade goods in port, or, in one bizarre case you hear about, turned into a makeshift crab trap. Efficient, if slightly undignified. But today, as you listen to that far-off clang echoing over the water, you realize something. Bells represent everything pirates rejected. Order. Control. The daily grind. On those Navy ships, the bell didn't just tell you what time it was, it told you who you were supposed to be. When to eat. When to sleep. When to die, if the admiral said so. Pirates didn't want that. They wanted freedom, even if it meant being late, disorganized, and occasionally very hungry. And there's a strange comfort in that. You start to see the absence of a bell not as a flaw, but as a feature. A statement. Like saying, we don't answer to time, we answer to each other. Someone beside you, an older sailor with a braided beard and a tattoo of a turtle playing a fiddle, leans close and mutters, "You want to hear a bell? Wait till a cannon misfires. That'll ring your ears proper." You both chuckle, and the sun dips a little lower. The other ship is fading now, its bell quieter with every minute. Soon, it'll be just you and the creak of wood, the soft slosh of waves, and maybe a few muffled sea shanties about mermaids and moldy bread. And you know what? That's enough. No bell needed. Time passes just fine without it. By now, the sun is hanging low, that perfect golden hour where every surface glows like it's been dipped in warm candle wax. The sails catch the light just right. Shadows stretch long across the deck. You lean against a barrel and notice that nobody announces sunset, but everyone feels it. You watch as a few crew members begin adjusting the sails for the evening wind. Others start laying out hammocks or double-checking lines. No one says, "It's 6 o'clock." They don't need to. Sunset is the ship's unspoken curfew bell. And this This is another way pirates kept time, by reading the sky. You might think celestial navigation was reserved for starched shirt captains on Spanish galleons, but even pirates, rough, tattered, sunburned pirates, could read the sky like a well-thumbed journal. Not all of them, of course, but someone aboard always could. Often the quartermaster, sometimes the navigator, occasionally the cook who just happened to know which star was Mars and which was your last chance of making port. Tonight, as the sun sinks lower, you spot the first sign of that practice in action. A sailor on the forecastle climbs partway up the rigging, not to fix anything, but just to see. He's looking for the first star, which would tell him how long until full night. There's no measurement tool in his hand, just a pair of sharp eyes and a memory stuffed with years of patterns. Because pirates, like their more respectable seafaring cousins, often measured time by celestial transitions, sunset, moonrise, the appearance of certain stars. Not exact minutes, but moments. Markers. The first star out might signal an hour to supper, if there's any left. The rising of Orion? That could be the midpoint of a night watch. And the moon's phase? It tells you not just time, but tide, which is arguably more important when your ship weighs several tons and has all the maneuverability of a sleepy cow. Historians still debate how widespread this kind of stargazing was among pirate crews. Some argue only the more organized captains bothered. Others suggest it was fairly common, especially among former naval officers who'd, accidentally, become pirates. You know, after a misunderstanding involving gold, rum, and a missing admiral's daughter. But the stars? They're free. No one can steal them. No one can misplace them in a storm. And unlike clocks, they don't rust or break when dropped overboard. The most important nightly tool wasn't just what pirates saw, but how they saw it. There's a technique called dead reckoning, and it's as dramatic as it sounds. It's not about zombies or ghost ships, though you hear plenty of stories about both. Dead reckoning meant estimating your position based on where you were, how fast you'd been moving, and for how long. All of which required some grasp of time, even if just by sandglass, sail shift, or sunset.so. Here's how it works, the helmsman would note. We were near the shoals 2 hours ago. Then estimate the ship's speed, maybe 6 knots, and direction. Multiply speed by time, and you've got a guess at how far you've gone. Combine that with your heading, and voila, you've plotted a rough new location. No GPS required. But here's the tricky part. If your timekeeping was off, even slightly, your whole reckoning fell apart. Imagine thinking you've traveled 20 miles when it's really 14. That kind of error could put you on a reef instead of a safe harbor. And pirates didn't often get second chances. That's why the crew took such care watching the stars and tracking celestial time markers. The stakes weren't just being late, they were being lost. And yet, it was soothing too. There's something grounding about standing on a gently rocking deck, your hands on the rail, your eyes tilted upward as the stars come out. No clock ticking in your ear. Just sky. Some nights there were games. Sailors would point out constellations and invent wild stories about them. That cluster? A sea dragon who swallowed the moon. That one? A mermaid's comb, stolen by a storm. It didn't matter whether they were true. What mattered was the pattern, the rhythm, the knowing of when one star followed another. You spot the North Star, bright and steady, just off the port bow. A sailor taps your shoulder and says, "That one doesn't lie." He says it like it's a friend. One that's never steered him wrong, no matter how many days he's been too hungover to flip the sandglass. And that's the lesson the stars teach, in pirate time, not exactitude, but trust. You trust that they'll be there. You trust that if you keep moving and keep watching, they'll show you where you are, and maybe even where you're going. Eventually, the sky turns velvet. Deep, dark blue with the kind of hush that only happens when everyone's looking upward. A few lanterns are lit, more for mood than need. The crew settles into a quiet hum. You lie on your back, eyes full of starlight, realizing that you're tracking time not by ticking minutes, but by glowing points millions of miles away. And it's working. You're not counting down the hours. You're counting constellations, letting them lead you slowly, gently, into the night. The stars are fully out now, scattered thick and glimmering across the sky like someone spilled sugar on velvet. The sea has gone glassy and dark, the horizon melted into a smooth blur of sky and water. You lie there listening to the wood creak beneath you, the ship breathing with the tide, and then, a curious thing happens. You hear whistling. Soft, rhythmic, rising and falling like a lullaby sung to the sails. You look over and see an old sailor perched by the rail, head tilted back, eyes closed, lips pursed. His boots are off, his toes tapping an invisible beat. It's not a tune you recognize, but it's familiar in another way, like it's measuring something. Turns out, it is. This is another time-keeping trick. Rhythm. Pirates used rhythm constantly. To hoist sails. To haul lines. To row, when rowing was still a thing. Rhythm wasn't just a way to keep everyone in sync. It was how they knew how long a task should take. You might not know it's 2 a.m., but you do know it takes 16 verses of a hauling song to raise the mainsail. Rhythm became a kind of internal metronome. Something that didn't rely on sight or tools, just muscle memory and repetition. You sit up and start to listen more carefully. Someone is drumming, very lightly, on a barrel with their fingertips. Not playing music exactly, more like keeping time. Each tap is measured, deliberate. It's a signal, not a show. Historians still argue whether pirate crews developed a standard library of rhythmic work songs, or if each crew sort of made it up as they went along. Either way, there's evidence that maritime labor, particularly among multinational crews, involved a lot of shared rhythm. Chants, claps, stomps. Less about harmony, more about coordination. Take the hauling chant, for instance. Not a song in the traditional sense, but a repeated phrase or call used while pulling ropes. The tempo matched the action, pull, rest, pull, rest. If you timed your steps or movements to the rhythm, your body started to expect when the effort would come. It was like time became a physical feeling. You didn't need to ask how long something took, you felt it in your arms, your breath, your sore hands. And those repeated rhythms could be adapted for different parts of the day. Faster ones for morning, slower ones in the evening when energy dipped. If someone started a chant at the wrong tempo, it could actually confuse the crew, or at the very least, earn them a few well-aimed potatoes. There's even a record from a captured merchant ship describing a pirate crew muttering their strange music while hauling lines at dusk. The observer noting they seemed as much dancers as sailors. Imagine that, a ship moving to the beat of its own crew, like a floating drum circle full of cutlasses and bad decisions. You try it yourself, tapping your hand on the deck slowly, deliberately. 1 2 1 2. You match it with your breathing, then your blinking, then your heartbeat. And just like that, you stop caring what time it is. You've slipped into pirate rhythm. There's another layer to this, too, ritual. Certain rhythms signaled specific parts of the day. A pattern of 3 knocks might mean, change the sail. A double stomp might mean, meals up. In the absence of clocks, rhythm became language. And if that language was interrupted, say, if a chant fell out of sync or a song stopped mid-verse, it could send a ripple of unease through the crew. You'd see heads turn. A deckhand might stop what they're doing. Time disrupted. It wasn't just about order. It was about trust. Rhythmic consistency told the crew that things were going as they should. that the night wasn't unraveling, that the ocean wasn't planning anything too mischievous. Yet, you think back to the Navy ships again. The bells, the shouted orders, the precise drills. Efficient, sure, but cold. Mechanical. Pirates had chaos, yes. But their chaos had a beat. It had a thump. A whistle. A hum. It had rhythm. Sometimes, on very still nights like this one, the whole ship seemed to sway in time with the crew. Like it was part of the performance. Like the ropes and wood and canvas were listening and responding. Someone near the galley door starts humming low and slow, no words, just tone. Another joins in. Then another. The sound spreads like fog, soft and strange, not quite music but definitely not silence. You feel it in your bones, and then it stops. All at once. No cue. No signal. Just silence. That's how you know the watch has changed. You look up. A new figure stands at the helm. A different sailor crouches near the lines. No one said anything. No one needed to. The rhythm told them. You smile, lie back again, and close your eyes. Out here, time isn't a number. It's a feeling. It's a song. And tonight, that song is carrying you somewhere you don't need to understand. Somewhere you can simply be. A few hours, or maybe just a few songs, later you wake with a soft jolt, unsure if you ever really slept. The deck is quieter now, soaked in moonlight and the hush of low voices. The ship has entered that in-between state pirates called the Deep Watch, when most of the crew is asleep and those awake move as if sleepwalking. It's midnight. Or what passes for it here. You sit up, stretch, and feel the cool breath of the sea on your cheeks. One of the watchmen nods at you from his post by the mast. His face is ghosted in silver, eyes half-lidded, hands in constant motion, coiling, uncoiling a length of rope as if by instinct. You've seen him do it before. Always the same rope. Always at this hour. Turns out, pirates had their own ways of marking midnight, and it wasn't with bells or fireworks. It was with patterns. Midnight on a pirate ship wasn't a singular moment, but a transition, a phase change. You felt it in the shift of the crew's energy, in the way voices dropped and routines slowed. There was even a term for this time, the middle watch, typically from midnight to 4 a.m. It was the most dreaded shift. Cold, dark, lonely. The time when hallucinations were most likely, and mistakes could cost sails or limbs. The sea seemed louder then, the stars more judgmental. You learned from one of the sailors, a wiry man with a raspy voice and a missing ear, that pirates often tried to avoid standing the middle watch 2 nights in a row. Not just for fairness, but because too many nights without sleep did strange things to your mind. You start seeing people in the water. He mutters, not quite looking at you. People with no heads. Or worse, people you know. He's not joking. You glance out over the rail. The moon ripples across the surface of the sea, casting shadows that shift and twist in ways your tired brain doesn't trust. It's beautiful. It's unsettling. It's midnight. Historians still argue whether pirates had formal systems for rotating the dreaded middle watch, or whether it was left to whoever lost the day's argument with the quartermaster. Some ships used dice. Others, an unofficial turn-taking code scratched into the mast. What's certain is that nobody liked being awake right now. But someone had to be, and so, pirates marked midnight not with a chime, but with small rituals. You watch as the helmsman, different from before, stockier, eyes sharp even in moonlight, taps the wheel 3 times. Not superstition, he insists. Just makes the wheel know you're here. You're not sure if he's joking. You also notice someone making tea. Actual tea. Not the refined kind with porcelain cups, but a tin mug of something boiled from herbs and seawater. probably flavored with whatever they found in the last port. It's not about taste, it's about rhythm. Midnight tea was a habit on this ship. Something to break the eerie silence. Something warm to hold. Even the sails seemed different now, less tense, more relaxed. As if they, too, are letting down their guard. The wind slows. The ship glides. You realize the sounds have changed. Daytime creaks become nighttime groans. Daylight flapping becomes deep, rhythmic sighs. And then there's the sky. At midnight, the stars are at their zenith. Overhead, they wheel in a slow, silent carousel. You tilt your head back and feel like you're falling into them. Some sailors say the stars move faster at night. That's nonsense, of course. But you understand the feeling. With nothing to compare them to, they seem almost alive. One pirate beside you is whispering names, not of stars, but of people. He's pointing slowly, one by one, across constellations. That's Lottie, he says. She used to sing like a gull. Another star. That's First Mate Crow. He lied about his maps, but died good. You realize he's naming lost crewmates. Stars as tombstones. A pirate's midnight eulogy. And you start to understand something strange. Even without clocks, pirates always knew when it was midnight. Not by seconds or minutes, but by atmosphere. The world changed. The ship changed. You changed. And that shift was enough. This was the only time of day that didn't need tools, chants, or ropes. Midnight made itself known. It pressed against your chest like the weight of a hand. It whispered at the edges of your vision. It hummed in your bones. And in that hush, in that silver-lit stillness, time seemed to pause. Not stop. Just hesitate. Like it, too, was catching its breath. You lean back again, watch the stars for a while longer, and feel yourself slipping, not into sleep, exactly, but into a rhythm older than any clock. A pirate's midnight. No bells. No buzzers. Just shadows, starlight, and the silent hand of the hour passing over you. A breeze curls across the deck, stirring ropes and canvas with a whispering touch. Somewhere behind you, a hatch creaks open and a pair of feet thump onto the boards. A crew member, face barely visible under a floppy wool cap, yawns so deeply you worry he might dislocate something. You don't need to ask what time it is. It's pre-dawn. That slippery, bleary moment when the stars still cling overhead but the horizon is thinking about turning blue. Nothing concrete yet, just a quiet promise. On a pirate ship, this is when time takes its strangest form. It becomes anticipation. Not an exact hour, but a question. How close are we to daylight? You shuffle to the rail and lean over, squinting into the dark. It's true what the sailors say. You don't see dawn so much as you feel it first. A drop in the wind's temperature. A change in the smell of the air, less briny, more like cold stone. And then, eventually, a glow. Faint. Indifferent. Unapologetically slow. This is another way pirates counted time, by twilight. They even had names for it. Some crews called it first light, others gray tide, and on some ships it was simply the blue edge. It wasn't about precision. It was about preparing. As the first hints of dawn colored the sails, pirates adjusted their routines. They checked the lines, tightened the rigging, finished their tea or tea pretending to be rum. Because when the sun rose, things moved quickly. The night crew would switch off. The helmsman would be replaced. The cook might stir from his hammock. And if you were unlucky, you'd be asked to climb something. But this early morning hour wasn't all business. For many pirates, it was also reflection. You spot a wiry deckhand, same one from earlier with the rope enchant trick, sitting cross-legged by the mast, carving something into a bit of driftwood. He doesn't look up, doesn't speak. just whittles and stares at the dark water like he's trying to remember what he dreamed. You sit nearby. Quietly. No one minds that there's something deeply human about this time of day. Not just pirate human, any human. It's when things feel most fragile, most honest. Even the roughest, salt-bearded swabby aboard this ship looks a little softer in the gray glow. Their scars blur. Their voices lower. Their movements slow to a kind of lullaby. Historians still debate how organized pirate mornings actually were. Did the captain give orders before sunrise? Did the crew rotate positions? Was there even a formal structure to begin with? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. Enough structure to keep the ship afloat, enough chaos to keep it interesting. But across almost every source, one thing is consistent: pirates respected the dawn. They feared it on days of battle, relished it on days of good wind. And on most days, like today, they simply let it unfold. No rush. No barked orders. Just a gradual acknowledgement that time had moved again. And so you watch. The horizon turns a little less black. A little more indigo. The clouds pick up a blush of color, as if embarrassed by how dramatic they're about to become. Someone lights a lantern and hangs it low near the galley door. Not for light, really, just as a kind of signal. Like a sleepy nod from the night shift to the day. Your turn. And sure enough, you hear the shift. A voice calls softly. Boots shuffle. Hammocks creak as their occupants stir. Nobody's shouting. Nobody's hurrying. But the ship is waking. The rhythm of the day is warming up, like a fiddler tuning strings before a tavern jig. The old quartermaster, stoop-shouldered, coat patched in 13 different shades of brown, steps up near the helm and spits into the sea. "It'll be calm today," he mutters, seemingly to no one. "Sky's got that pale look. Means she's thinking, not screaming. You don't ask how he knows that. No one does. He just knows. Experience, intuition, or witchcraft, whatever it is, it works that a young sailor beside you stretches and says, "3rd day since full moon," like he's announcing something important. Turns out, many pirates measured time in moon phases. Not for magic, but for tides, visibility, and the general rhythm of the ocean. 3rd day tells him how high the water will rise, how the wind might turn, and whether today's a good day for raiding or resting. It's oddly poetic. Pirates, for all their grime and violence, moved with the moon, slept with the tide, sang to the stars. And now, here they are, waiting patiently for a sunrise none of them will ever own, but all of them know by heart. Then it happens that a thin line of gold slices across the horizon, slow and deliberate. The first sunbeam slips through the rigging. The sails catch fire and gold. And someone, not loud, not showy, starts humming. Just like that, the day has begun. No alarm. No announcement. Just a sky full of slow promises. And a deck full of men and women who learned long ago that this was the only clock they really needed. With the sun finally breaching the horizon, the ship shifts again, not in course, but in mood. You can feel it as surely as the boards beneath your feet. The world is warm now, or at least trying to be, and that energy seeps into the crew like light into old bones. Breakfast isn't announced, it just happens. Someone clangs a ladle against a dented pot, and like moths to flame, pirates start to gather, rubbing their eyes, yawning, muttering half-hearted insults at each other. It's not elegant. It's not coordinated. But it's as routine as any sunrise. You grab a wooden bowl and take what's offered. Porridge? Gruel? Something suspiciously lumpy? You're not sure, but it's hot and it doesn't smell like fish, so you count that as a win. As you sit and eat, you notice another shift, not just in activity, but in noise. The ship gets louder after dawn. The hammering of repairs, The soft hiss of rope being spliced. The clatter of crates being rearranged. And of course, the cursing, low, constant, and bizarrely inventive. But the most interesting part? You start to hear stories. Morning, on a pirate ship, was story time. Not on purpose. No one gathered in a circle, holding mugs like kindergartners. But stories bubbled up as naturally as steam from a cup. Someone would complain about their sore shoulder, and another would remind them of that time in Port Royal when we all slept on cannonballs. Someone would mention the wind, and suddenly 3 people are arguing about the worst storm they ever survived. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were time markers. Pirates used them to measure distance between events. That happened after Jenkins lost his toe, someone might say, or right before we dumped the rum overboard that one awful night. You realize pirates often measured time relationally, not numerically. Not 2 weeks ago, but after the dog fight in Nassau, or before Peggy Sarah joined the crew. Every tale became a kind of floating calendar entry. Historians still debate how reliable these verbal timelines were. On one hand, they're riddled with exaggeration and rum-fueled embellishment. On the other hand, crews often agreed on major events. Oral tradition, when shared constantly, becomes surprisingly sturdy. Especially when everyone aboard has a stake in remembering who was actually to blame when the powder keg caught fire. You hear one story today that you've now heard 4 different versions of. The time the ship accidentally raided a wedding party instead of a merchant vessel. Some say there were flowers. Others say there were chickens. One swears there was a priest who blessed the loot out of spite. The details don't line up, but the feeling does. The timing, the laughter, the moment. And that's what makes pirate storytelling so unique. It's not about precision, it's about impression. The tale lives longer than any hour ever could. Someone tosses you a piece of dried fruit, nods, and launches into another story, this one about the ghost ship off Tortuga that only appears when the cook burns the beans. It's nonsense, obviously. But you catch 2 crew members glancing uneasily toward the galley all the same. You smile. Because here's the truth, pirates kept time by remembering. And they remembered through stories. There's even an unofficial archive aboard. You find it by accident, later that morning, carved into the beams below deck. Dozens of little notches, symbols, initials. Each one tied to something. A mutiny. A birthday. A storm. A kiss. Some have dates beside them, most don't. But every pirate aboard knows what they mean. You see one that just says Elbow Day in thick, jagged letters. No one explains it. No one has to. Stories are the ship's calendar. And breakfast is their publishing hour. You glance around the deck as the morning stretches on. The sun's climbing now. Sails snap with more confidence. Boots thud against boards as jobs begin in earnest. Someone sings. Someone shouts. Someone throws a bucket of water overboard that comes a little too close to you, and it's unclear whether that was an accident. And in all of it, in the laughter, the arguments, the grinding of wood against rope, you hear time passing. Not ticking, not talking. Just flowing. A crewman walks by and mutters, "Feels like a Thursday." You ask him what that means, and he shrugs. Just does. You don't press him. You understand now. On a pirate ship, time isn't a straight line. It's a tangle of memories, jokes, warnings, and war stories. It loops. It overlaps. It repeats itself with better punchlines. But it's theirs. And they carry it with them, no matter how far from land they drift. And you, bowl empty, belly full, sun on your face, you're part of it now. Another marker in a long, strange chain of afters and befores. You're not sure what time it is. But you know what kind of time it is, and that out here is enough. By mid-morning, the ship is fully alive. The deck pulses with sound, boots thudding, sails snapping, ropes slapping against damp wood like impatient tails. The crew moves in that strange pirate blend of efficiency and chaos. Nobody's exactly sure who's in charge of what, but somehow, things get done. A sail patched. A barrel shifted. A bucket emptied, hopefully not near your hammock again. And it's here, in this humming daylight bustle, that another kind of timekeeping quietly takes its place. Task time. You start to notice it, now that your eyes have adjusted to pirate ways. No one's checking a clock, or a sandglass, even. But everyone seems to know how long things take. Not in minutes. In task point, one sailor, muttering about needing to fix that spar before the next wind, isn't thinking of doing it by noon. He's thinking, before grog. Another says he'll finish the sail patch in less time than it takes Go-Tooth Jim to finish his second cup. You look over. Jim is sipping methodically from a mug that may or may not contain actual tea. This is time measured by each other. Pirates didn't say, "We'll set sail at 10. They said, "We'll leave after the new guy finishes fixing his mess." Spoiler, you are the new guy. And the mess is ongoing. You learn quickly that repetition builds a rhythm. Everyone knows how long it takes to scrape barnacles off the hull, because everyone's done it. Twice. Badly. You don't count minutes. You count blisters. It's a different kind of clock, one made of actions, not abstractions. Historians still debate whether pirates had official schedules during daily maintenance. Some suggest certain captains kept rough routines: morning chores, midday rest, afternoon drills. Others believe most ships ran on consensus. It's hot, the sail's loose, and that rope's going to snap. Let's fix it before we regret it. Either way, the measure of a task wasn't in how long it took. It was in what was accomplished. The line is taut. The cannon is clean. The powder is dry. That's the time marker. The job itself becomes the clock face. You hear someone shout, "It'll be done before the sun's behind the mainmast," and you realize he's using shadows as a measure. Pirates track sun position not by hour but by object. The sun over the helm? That's almost rest time. The shadow on the captain's cabin? Better start coiling the rope, storms do. This kind of shadow reading wasn't unique to pirates, of course. Farmers, monks, even desert nomads did the same. But pirates added a dose of cheeky metaphor to it. One old sailor tells you, "When the sun hits the goat's skull, it's time for rum." You don't ask about the goat's skull. And the best part? This system works. There's something deeply satisfying about looking at the sky, glancing at a shifting shadow, and knowing it's time to swap out the sail, or start peeling potatoes. It's like nature itself is gently herding you forward, without alarms or buzzers or passive-aggressive time cards. You start helping with one of the most tedious chores aboard: greasing the blocks. It sounds like a pirate euphemism, but it's exactly what it sounds like: applying animal fat to the wooden pulley blocks so they don't squeak and snap. Nobody times you. But halfway through, someone grins and says, "You're quicker than Peg-Leg doing his laundry." High praise, apparently. By now, your brain has adjusted. You don't wonder what time it is. You wonder what part of the day it feels like. And right now, it feels like the part where your back starts to ache, and someone tells a wildly untrue story about a chicken that once stole a knife. You realize pirates didn't see time as a ruler. They saw it as a loop. A loop of tasks that told them, wordlessly, what came next. And the body remembered. Point one pirate tells you he wakes every day at the same moment. Not by sun, not by bell, but because the ship groans a certain way in the morning wind, and that sound pulls him up from sleep. His body recognizes the cue. A wooden alarm clock, shaped like a holdout. There's even an argument near the bow, half-hearted, theatrical, between two sailors debating how long it really takes to replace a mast ring. One says, "A full moon's passage." The other says, "3 grog breaks and a curse." Either of them says, 2 hours. Because who would measure something like that? That's pirate logic. Time exists in the doing, not the counting. As midday approaches, the rhythm of the ship slows slightly. A natural lull. The heat presses in. Shadows shrink. Voices drop. Someone passes you a cup of something suspiciously opaque and says, "Sip, don't gulp. This'll make you see doubles." You sit back against a warm coil of rope, the sun high, the sails heavy with light. And as you sip the mystery drink, you think about clocks. The ones you used to check, the ones that used to boss you around. And now? Now time feels less like a master and more like a companion. A strange one, sure. Occasionally drunk. Definitely unreliable. But not unkind. And out here, with salt on your skin and rope burns on your hands, that's all you really need. The sun begins its slow tilt westward. The brightness of midday fades into a softer, more golden light, the kind that makes even the roughest parts of the ship look almost beautiful. The tar stains on the deck gleam. The frayed ropes glow like spun wheat. Even the most sun-scorched pirate aboard seems to get a moment of accidental radiance. This is the hour of anticipation, a liminal zone between labor and leisure. The jobs are mostly done. The grog isn't flowing yet, but it's thinking about it. Conversations drift lazily. The pace softens. And pirates, those restless masters of improvisation, slip into another subtle form of timekeeping, the lookout's lens. You wander toward the foredeck and find 2 crew members taking turns peering out to sea. One squints, blinks, then mutters, "Ship-sized shadow. Far port side. Not moving fast." The other snorts, "That's just your imagination again. Or a whale. Or dinner." This daily ritual, repeated with the regularity of a church bell, tells the crew more than just what's ahead. It tells them what time it is, because being on watch wasn't about spotting ships only, it was also a predictable task, part of the day's rhythm. A slot of time carved out by habit. Before supper becomes synonymous with on watch, and vice versa. The timing of lookout duties became a kind of sundial in itself, and like everything else on a pirate ship, it was wrapped in superstition. One lookout tosses a pinch of salt over his shoulder after every shift. Another claims he sees better when standing on one leg, though you suspect this may be a prank played by the rest of the crew. Historians still argue whether pirate watches were rigid or improvisational. Some records suggest formal rotations, 2 hours on, 4 hours off, likely borrowed from naval tradition. Others imply that pirate watches were more, well, vibe-based. As in, "You're awake and not bleeding? Great, you're on watch." Either way, the result was the same. Certain times of day were owned by certain roles. When you saw Jacob up in the crow's nest, you knew it was late afternoon. When tall Mari was leaning on the port rail, scanning with her one good eye, you knew you'd better finish your task. Grog wasn't far off. Pirates also kept a peculiar kind of lookout, emotional timekeeping. You hear it in the way someone mutters, "Feels like a storm day," even though the sky is clear. Or, "This breeze smells like a change coming." These aren't idle thoughts. They're instinctual assessments rooted in experience. You learn quickly that a good pirate didn't just track external time, they tracked internal tides too. How long had it been since tempers flared? Since food spoiled? Since someone mentioned mutiny half-jokingly? One pirate explains it like this. "A ship's a stomach. If it rumbles wrong, something's off. You just know." So time, here is more than stars and sails. It's mood. A barometer made of sighs, glances, and how loudly the quartermaster slams his cup down. And just like that, bang, a wooden mug hits the table near the helm. Loud. Final. You flinch. The crew does not. That sound? That's the signal for the last duty of the day. Winding down the deck, you watch the crew fall into motion. No urgency. Just calm, well-worn tasks. Lines coiled. Sails reefed. Tools returned. Everything ready for the night. And while they work, they talk. But the stories are different now. Slower. Softer. Less boastful. You hear someone say, "Tomorrow we pass the reefs. Remember last time?" Another murmurs, "We should check the water barrels. It's been 4 days since the refill." Not exact dates. Just markers. Last time. Since then. Soon. It's how pirates counted days. Not on paper, but through ritual memory. Tasks repeated. Warnings passed down. Lessons etched into palms and routines. And amid these whispers you catch something else. The occasional mention of land. Not always a destination, sometimes just a dream. Wonder if the bananas are ripe this time of year. Bet the tavern girl still throws mugs. These fantasies serve a purpose. They place the crew in time, not now, but later. They chart a future, one where solid ground and a roof aren't just legends. And by speaking it aloud, the pirates make time stretch forward. You lean over the rail again, golden light turning the waves into rolling coins. Far ahead, nothing but horizon. Yet everyone seems more relaxed now, like the day's purpose has been fulfilled. Not because a clock says so, but because the ship says so. Ropes are silent. Sails sigh. And the lookout, still perched high, calls down. Nothing but sea and sky. Which is pirates speak for, we're still afloat, and that's good enough for today. Evening. That's what it is now. No one says it out loud, but you can feel it settle across the deck like a warm wool blanket. The air has shifted. Softer. Quieter. You can still hear the creak of the ship and the lazy lap of the waves, but even those sounds seem to hush themselves, out of respect. Dinner is underway. Or what counts as dinner, anyway. Someone's ladling out a thick stew from a battered pot, and there's the faint scent of something vaguely meaty, or possibly smoky cabbage. You're not sure. It's hot, it's edible, and no one's fighting over it, so you join the quiet queue and accept your share like everyone else. You sit, cross-legged near the mast, bowl in hand, and eat while watching the last traces of sun disappear below the waves. This is the unspoken hour, the one not marked by work, nor by task, nor by shadow. Pirates didn't have a name for it, but every ship seemed to honor it, a strange, reflective quiet before the night truly began. They didn't need clocks for this. They had the feeling, that heaviness behind the eyes, the slow stretch of limbs, the murmured jokes with no punchline, the way voices dip and pitch lower, as if even laughter knows it should quiet down. Pirates mark this time not with bells or horns, but with rituals of stillness. The deck gets tidied, but not scrubbed. Knots are recoiled. Small repairs are done just for the sake of it. Someone takes a file to their blade, not urgently, just absently. Not because it's needed, because it's something to do with the hands. Historians still argue whether pirates kept formal evening watches, or if nighttime roles rotated more casually. Some sources suggest clear divisions: a night helm, a night lookout, a fire keeper. Others imply it was more intuitive. Those who were rested stayed up, those exhausted found rope coils and vanished beneath them. But what's certain is that every ship had an evening rhythm. Some sang, not loudly, just low and wandering sea ballads that changed every time you heard them. One sailor hums a tune now, the melody rolling across the deck like a breeze. Another hums with him, then another. You don't know the words. Maybe there are no words. Doesn't matter. You hum anyway. Others carved, repaired jewelry, played quiet games, dice muffled in cloth cups, or a card deck held together with tar and twine. You see one pirate flipping a coin back and forth across her knuckles in perfect silence. Not for luck. For calm. Then someone lights the lamps. Not bright, not many. Just enough to cast a golden halo around the galley hatch, the helm, and the stairs below deck. These weren't nautical necessities. They were comforts. Timekeepers of a different kind. You see one flickering near the quartermaster's cabin, and you hear someone say, "He always lights that one first." That lamp? That's evening. Another ritual? The scratch list. Not official. Not posted. But someone, maybe the cook, maybe the oldest hand aboard, goes person to person, checking in. "You good? Anything busted? Who's got the itchy leg again?" It's not about health, exactly. It's about morale. Stability. Making sure the ship's timekeeping isn't about to get interrupted by an unexpected emergency. You overhear someone say, 3 days till shore, if the wind holds." And someone else nods, replying, "Just enough biscuits." It's a casual exchange, but it means something. A timestamp. Not a date, not an hour. A projection. The future written in flour and salt. And you start to understand pirates kept time by expectation just as much as observation. The day ends not when a clock says so, but when the crew begins looking forward again. After dinner, a few crew members climb the rigging, not for a task, but for the view. The last orange streaks in the sky vanish, and the stars start to prick through. The sea reflects them, doubling the sky. You lie back again, hands behind your head, full and tired, and feel the deck beneath you shift with the weight of the waves. And in that moment, you finally feel what pirate time really is. It's not numbers. It's not gears. It's not even sun or moon. It's the crew, the murmured conversations, the matching rhythms of breath, the shared memories of rope burns and broken barrels, the lull of the evening wind, the smell of tar and stew and old jokes. It's a shared agreement that this slowing down, this winding in, is a kind of clock all its own. And somewhere in the quiet, you hear someone call softly, "Change o' watch." Not shouted, not forced, just said and understood, and the day, such as it was, begins to fold away. Night falls completely, not all at once, but in layers. First a soft gray curtain pulled across the sky, then a deep indigo hush, and finally, velvet blackness sprinkled with stars that seem too numerous to count. You can barely see the edge of the deck now unless a lamp flickers near it, and the sea has become a dark expanse, smooth and unknowable. This is the final stretch of pirate time, the silent hours. You don't know what time it is, not really. But your body tells you everything. Limbs heavy, thoughts slower. A deep yawn that pulls from somewhere in your bones. Whatever time it is, it's the hour of letting go. You hear voices, but quieter now. The day's tension has unwound. Conversations are mumbles. Laughter is more like breath. Even the ship creaks differently in the dark, less like protest, more like lullaby. The night watch has changed again. A different face at the helm. A softer cadence to the lookout's report. Someone is rubbing down the deck rails with a cloth. Nothing urgent, just a nighttime habit. On this ship, certain hands know these hours like second nature. They move without needing orders. They listen for splashes, creaks, strange winds. But they also listen for silence. The right kind of silence. The kind that tells you everything is still okay. One sailor passes you, patting your shoulder. Get some rest, he says. We're on the quiet side of midnight now. The quiet side. You like that? Because this hour isn't just the end of the day, it's when pirate time folds in on itself. A return to stillness. A soft clicking shut of a pocket watch you never owned. Historians still puzzle over how pirates managed to stay functional with such inconsistent sleep. With no clocks, no alarms, and no strict light cues, how did they rest in ways that kept the ship going? The answer, it seems, is rotation by rhythm. Crews knew when to step in. They didn't just sleep in chunks, they napped by feel. If your crewmate's voice cracked, if their arms moved slower, if their steps faltered, you nudged them below decks without a word. Rest wasn't a schedule, it was a shared responsibility. And pirates didn't always sleep in their hammocks either. Some curled in sails, others in the crow's nest. A few swore by the spot near the galley chimney, where it stayed warmest. You find your own place now, wedged between two barrels, with a coil of rope under your head and the faint scent of salt and tobacco in the air. You close your eyes, just briefly. You hear the sea. Not crashing, whispering. The kind of whisper that tells stories if you listen long enough. Stories of storms survived. Ports left behind. Gold that never existed and maps that led nowhere but still got followed. You hear the sails breathing. You hear the groan of wood shifting under weight. You hear a crew member softly humming a lullaby in a language you don't understand. Time, out here, has no ticking. It has no ending. It moves in loops. Ropes. Shadows. Songs. Stories. It drips from the stars and rides the crests of waves. It flickers in lantern light and gets carried in pockets of sea-worn coats. Tomorrow, they'll rise again, not to an alarm, not to a clock, but to the feeling that it's time. Time to haul. To cook. To curse. To laugh. To chase wind and distance. But for now, time belongs to rest. To silence. To the spaces in between. You let your breath match the rhythm of the ship. Long, even exhales. Inhale with the roll. Exhale with the creak. There's no countdown. No schedule. Just a slow drift into that part of night when nothing matters but staying afloat and staying asleep. The last thing you see, before your eyes finally close, is a star, faint, flickering, just above the mast. You wonder if someone once named it. If it marked a birthday, a battle, or a love long gone. Maybe it's just a star. But tonight, it tells you, you've made it through another pirate day. The ship rocks gently beneath you now, steady and soft, like a cradle that forgot to stop swinging. Around you, the sounds of pirate life fade into distant echoes, wood shifting, ropes swaying, an occasional low murmur in the dark. There are no lanterns lit anymore. No orders shouted. No tasks left undone. Only the night. Deep and endless. You feel it settle over you like a blanket of mist, cool, familiar, comforting. The sea stretches out forever, but for now, it feels small. Contained. As if the world has shrunk to just this ship, just this night, just this moment. Your breath slows. Your body sinks. And even the stars, proud and sharp just an hour ago, now seem to blur, softening at the edges as if they, too, are falling asleep. You don't need to remember the day. You don't need to guess the hour. The ocean will keep time for you now. The waves will watch over you. Let the ship drift. Let the wind decide. You're safe. You're steady. You're part of the rhythm now. Close your eyes. Nothing to chase. Nothing to hold. Just the sea, and the silence, and the slow heartbeat of the night. Good night, sailor.